Welcome to today's episode of the Buzby Dog Podcast, where we are going to discuss 7 common sense secrets to help your senior dogs. Okay, and so the truth is they're really not secrets, but they are common sense tips that are just commonly overlooked. And I think sometimes they're just so simple that people don't realize what an impact they can have. So today we're going to go through them and make sure that if there are any that could be helpful to you and your dog, that you are ready to apply them. So let's talk about what makes a dog a senior first, because I feel like these tips are most helpful for senior dogs. By most veterinary standards, we consider dogs 7 and over to be seniors. I remember at one point there was one of the major veterinary labs in the country running this big campaign, Senior at 7. And so that's kind of the general rule of thumb, but I don't have to tell you that as a rule, bigger dogs have shorter lifespans, smaller dogs have longer lifespans, and so that 1 dog year for 7 human years, it doesn't really apply. It's more of a continuum that actually is on a little bit of a curve, and you can find charts online that give a better explanation than I am. But as a general rule, somewhere between the ages of 5 and 10, a dog is going to become a senior. The giant breed dogs, younger, and the toy and small breed dogs, older. Aging itself is not a disease, but as many of us can attest to, aging takes a toll on our bodies. Often in the golden years of a dog's life, we depart from the simplicity of our dog's Plan A wellness journey and we move to Plan B. And Plan B often means that we need to make adaptations. And the biological definition of that word, I love this, I learned it teaching my kids science last year. Adaptation is the process of change by which an organism, in this case a dog, becomes better suited to its environment. So our dogs are inherently adapting to their changing needs and abilities as they age, but we are going to be proactive about doing all we can to help them thrive in their environment at whatever stage of health and mobility they may be. If you're new to the Buzby Dog Podcast, my eternal challenge to you is to be proactive in managing your dog's physical and emotional well-being. And that's really our goal, I think, as caregivers for our dogs, is to keep them safe and happy and enjoying life, and to be thinking outside the box to do that as challenges arise. Okay, so right off the bat, I want to say that one of the reasons dogs struggle as our cherished family members living with us in our homes is because I think we've forgotten that they're dogs. We treat them as humans, and number one, they're quadrupeds. They have 4 legs. We are bipeds. We have 2. And they're just different. They're created differently. Their needs are different. I mean, they're everything. Their digestive systems are different. So let's start with exercise. A domestic dog who spends most of his time on the couch, case in point here, is living in dramatic contrast to the life of a wild canine who would be traveling much more during a day. Dogs are designed to be on the move and moving literally miles and miles a day on the hunt. They're not designed to live like this. They're also not designed to be moving on hardwood or tile floors or painted concrete. Keep that in mind as we talk about this. We're always going to be thinking about how does this adaptation make sense for dogs in comparison to the way that they would normally go about the task in the wild. So tip number 1 is the idea of ramps. Yes, ramps. One of my saddest moments as a veterinarian was when I witnessed Greta, who was a big fawn Great Dane. She was a patient that I'd treated for several years for acupuncture for back issues. I witnessed her get injured in our hospital's parking lot coming in for a visit with me. Her family loved her so much, they had purchased a Land Rover. They got her own vehicle because it had some special feature of being able to lower and raise the chassis, and they realized that lowering that and she would have a lesser distance to jump down would be a benefit for her. Well, they did lower it, but before they could get around to help her out, she jumped out of the back of the car prematurely, and even though it was in this low position, supposedly, she still injured herself. And the diagnosis, I made it right there in the parking lot, was a ruptured cruciate ligament. It happened right before my eyes, and it was heartbreaking. So she went on to become a dog who had a fancy car and used ramps. My point is that ramps can be a really nice adaptation for dogs, both in getting in and out of cars and in and out of human beds and furniture, etc. I always tell my clients that jumping up, I'm not thrilled about that for older dogs with mobility issues, jumping up on things, but jumping down scares the dickens out of me. That's really when dogs get hurt, particularly a dog that has front end issues. It's just jamming to their front end, elbows, shoulders, and neck. It's a recipe for disaster. Now, it does require some training to teach dogs to use the ramp or maybe bedside stairs, which are another version of this adaptation. But it's really a nice way to keep your dog safe at home and getting in and out of the car. And speaking of this, I would not wait until my dog became a senior to teach him to tolerate the ramp. This can be an issue for many of my patients. The time comes, the owner says, you know what, I really should have a ramp, and the dogs completely balk at the idea and are freaked out and refuse to use it. So start earlier in life teaching your dog to tolerate a ramp. You can make it fun, make it part of a game, like a modified agility obstacle in your yard. And that training being under your belt can make, when the time comes to use a ramp, when the dog really needs it, a much easier transition. Okay, number 2 is specific to bath time. I'm not a fan of bathing dogs, extremely frequently. Now, some dogs do have skin issues, and that's a part of their treatment process, medicated bathing, and that does happen frequency. But skin issues aside, it's nice to give your dog a bath periodically, especially when they sleep beside you and have their head on the same pillow as yours. So put yourself in your dog's shoes. If you have a senior dog who's struggling to stay upright on all 4 paws and has decreased muscle strength, decreased balance, and now you put them in a slippery tub, you have just created the recipe for disaster. They're instantly going to change their posture when they're standing in that slippery tub because they're trying to engage with the ground. So their entire body is going to tense up, and I literally mean their entire body. You can visually see it happening. Their whole body. Their eyes are going to get big like saucers. They're going to exhibit this adrenaline-induced fight or flight reflex because they're not feeling safe and stable. And sometimes there is a fight involved. I'll never forget my roommate in vet school trying to bathe their dog in the tub, and I heard this ruckus, and I ran upstairs. I found the dripping dog, shaking in the hallway, water spraying all over the walls, and I found my roommate lying on her back in the bathtub laughing. So I get the fact that some dogs just inherently hate baths. But there may be an additional reason for that you haven't calculated in, and that is that it's scary. They feel very vulnerable standing on that slick porcelain surface. It's a prime place for the dogs to get hurt. So this is something very simple that you can do. If you're going to bathe your dog, really of any age, prevent injury, put down a non-slip bath mat or 2. This can make a world of difference in giving the dog some stability. My sister's dog, named Banjo, was a victim of a phenomenon called dead tail, and we're going to be podcasting about that very soon. It's fascinating, and it's something that you should be aware of. It's something that I didn't learn in vet school. I actually finally figured out the diagnosis sitting next to somebody on an airplane flying back from one of my sessions of acupuncture training and put all the pieces together. It's a version of spraining the tail. It's not fully understood, but it does seem to be associated with water, whether it be swimming in the ocean, a river, or even baths. We don't fully understand the cause, like I said, but I hypothesize that it's because dogs use their tail like a rudder, and when they're in water, even a bathtub, they're using their tail for balance. They're using it hard. And when they don't have stability, they can actually injure their tail, and it's an extremely painful injury. Like I said, more to come. But this is what happened to Banjo, and since then my sister put the pieces together and just said, hey, I need an adaptation here. Banjo's a therapy dog. He goes weekly and does therapy at a hospital, and so she's required to bathe him weekly before his visits. So she started placing bath mats in the bathtub, and the experience has been much more pleasant for both of them. I love listening to the way my clients adapt to their dog's needs. They're essentially listening to their dog's body language. One of my patients is a 12-year-old Great Dane. She's an old lady and somewhat of a walking miracle. At the age of 11, she survived surgery for bloat, which is a life-threatening twisting of the stomach. It's a very fast and rapidly critical emergency, one of the few in veterinary medicine where literally every minute counts. So Sasha, a sweet Great Dane patient, her parents have developed several adaptations for her life. One of them is the way they give her a bath. So again, she's a big Great Dane. Picture this. Thankfully, they have a big walk-in shower, and it was hysterical listening to them at an appointment recently describe how they do this. So they get in their bathing suit. So picture dad in his like rash guard and swim trunks, and they bring a stool into the shower and he sits on it, and they kind of drape Sasha over his knees, so if she gets tired, she can just kind of sag down onto his lap. So now they're getting the job done. She's comfortable and secure, but they came up with this wild adaptation themselves, but it works. And it's a little family bonding experience in the shower. All right, the next adaptation is the concept of elevated food and water bowls. And I know this has been around for a long time. It's really not a great revelation here. But if your dog has had any sort of difficulty with his front end, so any sort of neck problems or really front end issues, I think elevating the food and water bowls is just a critical, simple thing you can do to prevent that chronic, repetitive straining motion of bending down over and over to eat. So it's not something, your dog's gonna do once a week. I mean, every bite he takes, he's gotta bend down into the food bowl or drink, bend down to the water bowl, and lift that head back up again. And depending on the height of the dog, that can be a big bend. It's like this chronic repetitive strain injury that can occur. So it's a much easier and safer way for senior dogs to eat and drink if their neck is in a more normal, neutral posture. Can I help you with that? You want some help? Okay, maybe not. You think you do a better job? I mean, the process of reaching down, as I said, it's just happening over and over and over again, and it's something that you can fix so easily. As I said before, if your dog has had any sort of a cervical disc issue, neck problems, this becomes the dog's Achilles heel. It's a place that they can quickly become re-injured, so we want to do everything we can in the way of adaptations to help them not suffer the injury again. All right, number 4 is in honor of one of my favorite clients. He was this brilliant guy. I think he was a geothermal engineer, whatever that even means. He was also a pilot, and he was just really brilliant. He had a senior dog who would repeatedly injure herself when the UPS man would ring the doorbell. She would just go, she was a senior, older girl, but full of life, and she would go ballistic and go scrambling through the hallways to the door and crash into the corners as she went. So the first thing he did was disassemble the doorbell and remove that trigger for her. And that's not the adaptation I'm recommending. So don't worry, I'm not asking you to disassemble your doorbell, but I did admire his proactive approach to neutralizing the problem. What I am suggesting is thinking along the lines of the second thing he did. His wife was deployed, and he was a bachelor for a year, and he said, you know what? My dog really struggles to get up on the furniture, and I know she really enjoys being on the furniture with me. So he either unscrewed or cut the legs off of every piece of furniture while his wife was gone. And I loved his unconventional solution. He recognized the jumping up, jumping down issue was not only physically demanding on the dog, but also an emotional frustration for her. She wanted to be on the couch. That was her spot. But her hind legs were getting weaker and weaker. So he made the adaptation of lowering the couch right down to floor level, and he was glowing as he described this to me. He was so happy with himself and how happy the dog was. So don't worry, I'm not asking you to chop the legs off your couch, but I want you to think about the basic principle that he used, which was looking at his dog, looking at what his dog loved to do, looking at what his dog could no longer do, and coming up with some ideas and adaptations to help his dog have a better quality of life. So this is what I want you to ask yourself. What could I do to make the place more accessible for my dog in a way that's going to keep my dog safe? My best friend's dog, Abby, was recently diagnosed with laryngeal paralysis, another podcast topic. It's really a fascinating thing that we now realize affects not just the larynx, where the name laryngeal comes from, but it's a generalized nerve condition, and so it can be associated also with hind end weakness. So Abby can no longer get up on the couch anymore where she used to live and love to be. So my friend took this principle and she modified a little couch-like version on the floor and gave Abby this spot. So when the family's all together, they spend a lot of time in this room watching TV. Abby has her own little couch-like spot where she can feel comfortable, but she's safe getting up and down, and she's really happy. One of the other things that happens to senior dogs as they age is that their vision becomes less accurate. And sometimes that's due to cataracts, but more often than not, it's a change called lenticular sclerosis, which is not cataracts. It can look similar, but it's just an older dog change, and your veterinarian can help you distinguish. It's not considered to be pathologic, the lenticular sclerosis. So as the sense of sight weakens, this can be intimidating for your dog and set up for injury. So first of all, I strongly recommend the use of a night light. So that's such a simple thing, but it can make a huge difference for older dogs. So where your dog sleeps, or maybe if there's a path your dog might travel at night, like a hallway, use a night light. That little bit of light in contrast to complete darkness can really help these dogs so well and be more comfortable, as I said, physically and also psychologically. I just had a client tell me recently that their 13-year-old shepherd had been acting funny at night and not getting settled, and really there can be dozens and dozens of causes for this in senior dogs, but they just started with a nightlight and it made all the difference in the world. For now, it solved the issue. So again, it's a simple, cheap, easy adaptation and just a little secret. I mean, it's so common sense, but it's something that can really make a big difference. So along those same lines of vision issues, point number 6 also has to do with how we can help our dogs see things more clearly and feel more confident, specifically on stairs. Now, stairs can be a traumatic experience for senior dogs on a lot of levels. I mean, first, we just have the basic issue of traction if they're, for example, hardwood stairs and your dog is slipping. But imagine yourself with poor vision standing at the top of a flight of stairs, looking down on this uniform pattern of maybe hardwood floor, and you really can't tell where one stair ends and where the next stair begins. It's just a little more cloudy. That would be a place where you would not readily want to walk. So, dogs that have trouble on stairs can often be helped by taking tape and just outlining the border of the stair on the edge, certainly that leading edge of the step, but the sides too, and just giving dogs a visual boundary, outlining the stair. It can really make a big difference in them feeling confident navigating the stairways, and also can provide a little bit of traction if the tape can serve that function as well. So along with the discussion of traction, we're going to reach the final adaptation, my personal favorite, and the disclaimer is that I'm about to talk about a product that I manufacture and market called Dr. Buzby's ToeGrips. But as I said before, a lot of times dogs are struggling because we've brought them into our homes, out of their natural environment, and they're not designed to be living on and walking on the hard surface floors that we have in our fancy, beautiful houses. Now, even young dogs may slide around on hard floors, and sometimes people laugh and think that's funny. I don't think it's funny because I look at it and see that's an injury waiting to happen. But for the most part, young dogs have excellent balance and tendons and ligaments and muscle tone, and they compensate and live a fairly normal life in these environments. But senior dogs are a totally different story. So for these dogs, we're asking them to compensate on a surface for which they're not designed, but they've lost really a lot of that compensating ability with age. So it takes a toll on them physically. It also takes a toll on them emotionally. I remember driving early one morning on this 2-lane road in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. It was like 6 a.m. and I was headed to a veterinary conference and I was half asleep. Well, let me tell you, something happened that woke me up like that, and that is I'm driving this big SUV. All of a sudden, I'm behind a Amish buggy that was going like 12 miles an hour, so I wasn't very happy about that because I was trying to get to my conference. But all of a sudden, I no longer had control of the steering wheel. It might have been misting or drizzling, I don't remember, but the road was wet, and I hydroplaned, and it was one of the most terrifying experiences of my life because I'm now behind the Amish buggy, crossing over that middle dotted line, and it didn't matter what I did, I was in zero control. And I can only imagine that it might feel like that to a dog who's got his toenails designed to grip like cleats into the earth, but now they're supposed to walk across the tile floor of the kitchen, and they're doing what they're supposed to be doing, which is trying to flex their paws and grab with their nails, and it's not working. I wonder if it doesn't feel like hydroplaning to the dog. Like I said, it's petrifying, and I actually do believe with all my heart that these dogs are stripped of their confidence in a similar way. So we talked about the fact that a dog uses their nails for traction, and that's the beauty of this adaptation called ToeGrips. ToeGrips are non-slip nail grips that fit on the end of dogs' toenails, so when they do go to use the nails for grip, they have non-slip material, and turns out it doesn't take much, that allow them to grab as nature intended. So once again, this is just such a simple little common sense adaptation. The dog now has what we call a grip zone, and it can really be life-changing physically in terms of a dog's ability to be mobile in their home, and also emotionally as they just get more confidence walking on the floors where they live, and they're entitled to feel confident walking around their houses, right? So in today's podcast, we've covered 7 adaptations for senior dogs, and I think there's probably a million more. I'd love you to go to our website and visit the blog that has this same title. And I would be delighted for you to leave a comment and let us know what adaptations you've come up with in your home for your dogs. I learn a ton from my clients. They amaze me with their thoughtfulness and their innovations and their creativity. And we are a community of passionate, proactive dog owners who should absolutely be learning from one another. Let's walk the journey together and keep our senior dogs walking the journey with us for as long as possible.